to ask. And then typically we have people mute their phones in between while she's speaking, because background noise really interferes. Yeah. So I'm going to mute. I'm going to stop my video, and I'm going to mute. And Anusha, you may have, if you see people, people come on, you may have to remind them about the muting.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Perfect. All right, now I'll come back close to 9 and to stop the recording. If you have to go a little over, it's totally fine.
Okay.
Okay, we'll have fun.
Great.
Okay.
I think, let me see, am I too dark here today? Before it was too bright, and today it's too, is that okay? Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm cutting off my head. Okay. Okay, well, it's 8 o'clock. I think we can get started, and everyone else can join in as they come. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. For those of you who are joining us for the third session of the review, it's great. Anyway, it's always good to review the topics. The more you hear it, the more it sort of solidifies in your mind. So if you're here to review once again, you're more than welcome. You can hear it as many times as you like. Repetition, repetition. It really helps. That's the same way we all study. Okay, so welcome back to our official second part of the revision. And so today we will again review most of the topics that's there in your study guide for the final exam. And we're going to try and just go through each and every one of the questions, and I'll review the answers to each one of the topics, and if necessary, discuss that a little bit with you. If you have questions along the way, for those of you who are on the call, feel free to ask, so that, if there's a topic that you really require a little bit more we can absolutely discuss that, and we can make sure to have that clarified in your mind so that when it comes time for the exam, you know, it's there, it's accessible, and you really grasp the concept of it. Okay, so feel free to ask questions in between. Okay, so let's get started for today. I'll just go through the study guide. So the first question on your study guide is, what is the definition of health according to Ayurveda in Sushruta Samhita? And that's something we had talked a lot about in the class, but just again, as to review, the definition of that is sama dosha, sama agnischa, sama dhatu, mala kriya, prasanna atma indriya manaha swastha itya vidiyat. Okay. So just a quick reminder, thank you. For those of you who are joining in, if you can please mute your microphone so that we don't have a lot of background noise, and also it becomes an echo of the voices, okay? So sama dosha here, remember again, we're talking about sama means balance. So we need to have a balance of the doshas. Of course, we know now that we're always trying to attain a balance and an equilibrium between the three doshas. So what are the three doshas? Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And so sama dosha means the balanced state of each one of these three doshas. They are always existent in the body, but they carry out certain functions. And if they carry out their functions in the normal manner without being in an increased state or without being in a depressed state, then that is considered sama avastha, or in a balanced state. Okay? So that is one of the first factors that is required for a person to be healthy. The second thing that we need to make sure that is in the definition of a healthy person, or swastha, as per Ayurveda, is sama Agni. That means a balanced Agni. And this question comes in later, and I see a lot of you had some questions relating to Agni and digestion. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But here we're talking about, again, a balanced Agni. So what do we mean by a balanced Agni? Remember, we learned that there are 4 different presentations of Agni. Here when we talk about Agni, Agni means the fire, right? Agni means the fire element. The fire element, which is really very essential to our being, essential to digestion, essential to metabolism, assimilation and absorption, and basically use of everything that we are putting into our body or exposing our body to. Okay? So sama Agni means a balanced Agni. That is the only state where the Agni is normal. The other 3 types of Agni, or presentations of Agni, such as Tikshna Agni, which means it is very strong or very penetrating, typically associated with a Pitta Prakriti or a Pitta constitution type, or also in conditions where Pitta is aggravated, or a Pitta Vikriti, you may get this Tikshna Agni, or very strong, very high Agni. Another presentation of it is Manda Agni, which is a very slow Agni that is typically associated with a Kapha Prakriti or a Kapha Vikriti. That is a Kapha constitution type or a Kapha imbalance, usually an aggravation of Kapha. You tend to have the presentation of Manda Agni, or a slow Agni. And the other presentation of Agni is Vishama Agni, which means it's very irregular. Sometimes it's very high, sometimes it's very low. It's never constant. So that Vishama Agni, or that irregular Agni, tends to be associated with a Vata Prakriti or a Vata Vikriti. That is a Vata constitution type or a Vata imbalance, typically when they aggravated Vata. Okay? So there was a question earlier that someone emailed to me beforehand, and they asked, how do we determine, you know, when we talk about these irregularities or these different types of Agnis, what does that really mean? How do we know that the person has that type of Agni? Is it by the duration of how long it takes for digestion, or is it other symptoms? So that was a really great question, because that's exactly right. That's exactly how we determine or define if somebody has Manda Agni or Tikshna Agni or Sama Agni. So ideally what we want to look at is when a person consumes a meal, how long does it take for them to feel hungry again? If it takes, so this is what we ask them, do you tend to feel, typically the question we'll ask is, how is your appetite? How is your hunger? Do you tend to feel hungry, at specific times during the day? Do you find that your hunger is very irregular? Is it according to your activity, or do you not feel hungry at all? So even before we give them these options, they usually say, sometimes it's really odd that I feel really, really hungry, and then other days I could go the whole day without eating anything at all. So that is an example of a Vishama Agni, where sometimes it's very high, and then sometimes it's very low, okay? So that basically tells you for a person to feel hungry, that means that whatever they have consumed in the previous meal has to be digested. When it is digested, then only the hunger will arise again, telling you that your stomach is empty and you need to put some more in, right? So that's the sort of the defining factor of how we grade or how we can understand the different presentations of Agni. So if it is Sama Agni, ideally what we want to see is that the person has a regular interval between meals. So for instance, they feel hungry, they tend to always feel hungry. As soon as I wake up in the morning, I'm really hungry. As soon as I get up, I do my daily routine, I get ready, and then I need to eat something right away because I'm really hungry. So they eat their meal, and then exactly by lunchtime, whatever that time difference is, again, it's like clockwork. They'll say, I feel hungry exactly at the same time.
No, thank you.
I need to make sure that I have food at this time, otherwise my hunger is uncontrollable. So those regular intervals, it's within around the same time period that they feel hungry every single day. That is an example of Sama Agni, where it's very regular, it's very balanced, that it's always the same time, and you can depend on this Agni always showing up at these particular intervals. And also we look at to see the digestion, because again, like I just mentioned, the person feels hungry once the previous meal has been digested, right? We all know this. If we eat breakfast in the morning, then we know how long, depending on how long it takes for that to digest. Sometimes if our activity is more or activity is less, it will determine how much time it'll hold us off before we start to feel hungry again. So that's basically determining how long it has taken for that food to digest and your stomach to become empty, so that your Agni can arise again and you'll feel hungry, and it's telling you, I need some more food now. You need to give me some more food. Okay? Does that make sense? So hopefully you get a little bit of a better idea as to how we determine the different types of Agni. So the same would go for Manda Agni. If a person has Manda Agni, the Agni is slow. So because of that, it takes more time to digest a meal. Therefore, there will be a longer gap between meals. There'll be when you consume the food, it holds you off for a very long period of time. And typically you should feel hungry somewhere around lunchtime, but you still don't feel hungry. And it'll take you probably all the way up until 4 or 5 in the evening before you start to feel hungry again. So that indicates Manda Agni. The Agni is very slow. The Agni is very weak. So therefore, it requires more amount of time to digest the food that is there in the stomach, so that it can empty out, and then it can then rise up again, telling you that, okay, my stomach is empty, I need you to eat more. Okay? So that's how we tell, according to what is the presentation of the Agni. And the reason we talked about this, remember we had mentioned in class that these other presentations, the Vishama Agni, the Tikshna Agni, and Manda Agni, all of these are actually aggravated states of Agni. They're not normal states of Agni. The only normal presentation of Agni is Sama Agni, where it is balanced and it is predictable. When it is in these other states where it is either too strong or too slow or too irregular, then that is an aggravated state. And that typically is brought on because of the samana vata. Remember, we had talked about this, that samana vata is what ignites the Agni. It is what is responsible for causing the Agni to flare up. So if the samana vata is very strong and it's blowing too much and it's igniting it more than it should, then you get a presentation of Agni. If the samana vata is not igniting at all, it's very low, then you'll get a presentation of Mandagni. If the samana vata is very irregular, sometimes it's very strong, sometimes it's not there at all, then you get a presentation of Vishama Agni. Okay? So ideally, even in all of these cases, there is an issue with the samana vata, because samana vata is responsible for the initiation of that Agni. Okay? So does that make sense now? Hopefully? Okay. So in the definition of health, the Agni, the type of Agni that we want is we want Sama Agni. Okay? We want a balanced Agni. So that is another very important component in a person being healthy. The next component is Samadhatu. So that means the balance of all 7 of the dhatus. So we know the 7 dhatus are Rasa, Rakta, Mamsa, Meda, Asti, Majja, and Shukra. Okay? So Rasa is plasma, Rakta is blood, Mamsa is muscle tissue, Rasa, Rakta, Mamsa, Medas is fat, Asti is bony tissue, Majja is bone marrow and nervous tissue, and Shukra is reproductive tissues. Okay? So we want a balance or a healthy, nourished, and healthy functioning of all 7 of the dhatus. So that is also an important factor in a person being healthy. And we also want samamala. We want a balance of the production of these malas. Here, when we talk about malas, we mean the 3 malas, which are purisha, which is fecal matter, mutra, which is urine, and swedas, which is sweat. So fecal matter, urine, and sweat. These are the 3 major malas, or the 3 major waste products, and these also need to be in a sama avastha. They need to be balanced, which means that there should be a regular, normal production and excretion of these waste products as well. So we had spent quite a lot of time in looking at the waste products and the consistency and the quality of the waste products, but we know now that all of these factors are indicators of what's happening inside the person's body. So if there is a deviation from the sama avastha, then that also indicates that there's a deviation from the normal, healthy functioning of the body. Okay? So when they are in samavastha, in the balanced state, that is the balanced state of dosha, balanced state of Agni, balanced state of dhatu, and balanced state of malas, then the person is truly healthy because all the systems get checked in these 4 things. Okay, so this first aspect, or this first line of the shloka, is looking at the physical body. The next line looks at the subtle body. And we also need to make sure that the subtle body is also healthy. So how do we define the health of the subtle body? It is defined as prasannata. Prasannata means for it to be contented and to be satisfied. Okay, so we want a contented and satisfied atma, which means basically the soul or the spirit. We want prasannata, we want a contented and satisfied indriyas, the sensory organs, and a contented and satisfied mind, the manas. Okay? With all of these 3 that make up the subtle body, these also need to be in a balanced state. So in the balanced state, meaning the prasannata of the atma, indriya, and manas, or the soul, the sensory organs, and the mind, then that all of this in combination equals a person who is truly healthy in all layers and all levels. Looking at the holistic approach of the person, that means that they are healthy. So when we talk about, you know, a person, we look at the body, the mind, and the spirit. So in the body, mind, and spirit, all of these things need to be in a balanced state, and that equals a healthy person. Okay? So any questions there? Okay, so I'm going to assume, since I got no questions, I'm going to assume that that was kind of clear. Okay, so that's the definition of health as per Ayurveda. And this particular shloka is found in Sushruta Samhita. Okay, so the next question is, what are the 24 objects in the descent of consciousness according to Sankhya philosophy? These are known as the Chatur Vimshati Tattvas. That Chatur Vimshati is just the Sanskrit word for 24. Chatur is 4, Vimshati is 20. You know, like the Vimshati Gunas or the 20 Gunas that you've learned? Same way, Chatur Vimshati is 24. And so what are the 24 tattvas, or the 24 factors that are responsible in evolution of the universe? So in Sankhya philosophy, Sankhya literally means to count or to enumerate. And so in Sankhya philosophy, one of the major theories that they have put forward is how the universe has evolved. And in looking at the evolution of the universe, they also are describing the evolution of the human body, because we know that the body is the microcosm and the universe is the macrocosm. They're both equivalent to each other. Okay, so when we're understanding the laws of the universe and laws of physics, and we're looking at how that greater evolution happened, those same concepts also apply to the evolution of the individual being. So that's why we look at these same 24 components in an individual being. So the 24 tattvas are, first one is Prakriti, which is sort of the primordial nature. After that, from this primordial nature, you get Mahat or Buddhi, which is also known as the intellect, or the pure knowledge, the pure essence of that. From there comes Ahankara, which is the ego or the I sense. And from there, you get all of the different types of indriyas and also the bhutas. So you have, on one aspect, you have the 5 karma indriyas, or the 5 organs of action. Then you have the 5 jnana indriyas, or the 5 sensory organs through which you gain knowledge. And then you have the mind. And on the other side also, in this evolutionary process, you have 5 tanmatras, or the 5 subtle elements. And then you have the 5 mahabhutas, or the 5 gross elements. Okay? So if we count that up, that's how we get 24. So these are the 24 tattvas. Or through this, we look at the evolution of the individual being. Okay? So if we were to look where we had just, this is again just for your knowledge, you need to know the 24, but you don't necessarily need to know which is the subtle body and this gross body. Just for your knowledge, the gross body is made up of the 11 indriyas, that is the 5 karma indriyas, the senses of action, the 5 senses through which we gain knowledge, the mind, the 5 tanmatras, the 5 mahabhutas, or the 5 elements. These are all the gross body. The ahankara and mahat and prakriti is actually through where we get the subtle body, which is again sort of the description of what we looked at in the actual components in how they have defined swastha. Okay? So the next question asks then, what are the 5 tanmatras, or which are the 5 subtle elements? They are Shabda, which is sound, Sparsha, which is touch, Rupa, which is form, Rasa, which is taste, and Gandha, which is odor. Okay, these are the 5 subtle elements. And from these we get the 5 gross elements, or the Mahabhutas, the great 5 elements. And the great 5 elements are Akasha, space, Vayu, air, Tejas or Agni, which is fire, then Jala, which is water, and Prithvi, which is earth. Okay, so we know these are essential. You absolutely need to know your 5 elements. Okay, So you have your 5 tanmatras and the 5 elements. The next question is, what are the 5 jnana indriyas, or which are the 5 sensory organs through which we gain knowledge? So again, this is very easy. These are 5 sensory organs that we know of, that we typically associate with the word sensory organ. So those are the ears, the eyes, the nose, the tongue, and skin. Okay? So the Sanskrit words for that is Shrotra, which is the ears, Chakshu, which is the eyes, Nasika, nose, Jihwa is tongue, and Twak is skin. Okay, these are the 5 jnana indriyas, or the organs through the sensory organs through which we gain knowledge. Okay, then because from there we actually gain information. You can see, you can visualize things through your eyes, you can feel things through your skin, by touch. Okay, so through that we're gaining a certain amount of knowledge. The next question is the 5 karma indriyas, or the 5 organs of action, and they are the vocal cords, or the tongue, which is responsible for speech, the hands, which is responsible again for action, the feet, which is responsible for movement, the genital organs, which is also responsible for reproduction and excretion of urine, and then the anus, which is responsible for excretion of fecal matter. Okay, so these are the 5 organs of action. The next is the 6 is the 5 elements, and with that the 5 senses that they are associated with. Okay, so the 5 elements, as we had mentioned, is akasha, which is space, and the sensory organ, or the sense that it is associated with, is hearing. So for instance, if we look at the actual structure of the air, which I think we had talked about this in class as well, if we look at the actual structure of the air, in order for the air to function, it's actually a lot of space. There's a very subtle, unique balance of the space in the air, in the cochlea of the air, that actually helps us to perceive sound. Okay, and also if you look at it, you need space to produce sound. You notice that if something is filled and there is no open space, there's no empty space, it cannot produce sound. Only when it has more space, it actually produces sound. Like an empty vessel makes the most noise. So you need space, you need akasha mahabhuta, you need space in order to produce sound. Okay, so therefore hearing is associated with akasha, or space element. Wind, or vayu, which is wind, is associated with touch, because again, in order to perceive touch, you need some amount of movement. There has to be some disturbance or some movement in order for you to perceive touch. So that is associated with vayu, or wind. Of course, for Agni, or fire, the fire element is associated with sight, because again, it is illumination. You need to have light in order to perceive, in order to visualize something. If there is lack of light, you cannot visualize, you cannot see. So in order to be able to perceive vision, you need light. That's also the reason why they say that the fire element is also responsible, and is seated in the eyes. It is responsible for the functioning of the eyes. Okay, so sight is the sense associated with the fire element. Jala, which is water, is associated with taste, because again, we cannot taste anything without a liquid medium. We need a liquid medium in order to be able to perceive taste. Okay, and the final one is earth, which is Prithvi Mahabhuta, or earth, is associated with the sense of smell. Okay, because again, that requires some amount of molecules, something that has a odor, which is basically a molecule. So that is in the grossest form, which is the earth element. Okay, so earth element is associated with smell. The next question is, which are the 5 elements that come together to form the doshas? So we had again, a revision of what we talked about in class is, we know that the 5 elements exist in every substance in the universe. So the universe is made out of 5 elements. Every substance in the universe is made out of 5 elements. And we are also made out of 5 elements. That's why we have such a close relationship with our environment. We're actually all composed of the same thing. So the 5 elements, how they're represented and how we understand the existence of the 5 elements in the body is through the doshas and the functions that these doshas carry out. Okay, so the doshas, the 5 elements are, again, akasha and vayu, or space and air, and that comprise, those two combined together is how we get vata dosha. Okay, the next is agni and jala, or fire and water, and those two combined together is how we get pitta dosha. And jala and prithvi, or water and earth, is combined together is how we get kapha dosha. Okay, so these are the 3 doshas, and these are the combinations of the 5 elements that make up these doshas. The next is list the 3 great classical texts in Ayurveda, known as the Brihatrayis. Okay, Brihat means the greater or the first and foremost, and Trayi means 3. Okay, so here we know that the 3 major texts of Ayurveda are Charaka Samhita, which is, this is in chronological order, by the way. Charaka Samhita, which is the first and foremost major text of Ayurveda. Shushruta Samhita came afterwards, and then finally Ashtanga Hridaya. So just for your knowledge, you don't necessarily need to know this one, but Ashtanga Sangraha is also included in that because they both of these texts were written around the same time and by the same author, or supposedly the same author. They both had the exact same name, which is Bhagavata. Okay, so for the purpose of the exam, you need to know these 3: Charaka Samhita, Shushruta Samhita, and Ashtanga Hridaya. Okay, these are the 3 major texts or Brihatrayis of Ayurveda. These are our 3 sort of source texts or classical texts that we all refer back to. So the next one is define the terms sattva, rajas, and tamas. So we learned about, the doshas being the combination of the 5 elements and how they carry out functions in the body. Similarly, there are also doshas and qualities of the mind. So sattva, rajas, and tamas are the qualities of the mind. Sattva is the innate quality of the mind. It is the true, purest nature of the mind. And rajas and tamas are considered the doshas of the mind. They are abnormal states of the mind. Okay? So sattva, or also we typically know it as sattvika. So for instance, sattva guna, if something has sattva guna, it's termed as sattvika in nature, or it is sattvika in guna, sattvika in qualities. Okay, so sattva is typically associated with cleanliness. So these are the typical qualities associated with that. Cleanliness, and that's cleanliness of the body, mind, and speech. Okay, cleanliness of body, mind, and speech is part of sattvika guna or sattva. Spirituality, virtuousness, nobility, and being ethical. So all of these things are associated with sattvika guna. Okay. We also have things, the qualities associated with rajas, which are very talkative, pride, anger, vanity, jealousy, and bravery. Okay, so if we look at it, these are kind of representations similar to certain elements that you can say the impressions of these elements in the mind. So the rajas guna is typically associated with more amount of Agni or fire in the mind, and tamas is associated with more amount of sort of the water and earth, more grounding qualities in the mind. Okay, so the rajasika qualities, again, the typical characteristics associated with rajasika are talkative, pride, anger, vanity, jealousy, and bravery. And tamas is associated with fear, ignorance, sleep, laziness, and grief. Okay, so these are the typical sort of personality traits and qualities we can find in the mind. If we wanted to term these qualities, like for instance in food, so you have sattvika food, you have rajasika food, you have tamasika food. The reason they're termed this is because it produces or enhances these same qualities in the person's mind. So for instance, if we consume a food that is sattvika in nature, it will enhance or nourish the qualities in our mind, such as cleanliness and purity of our body, mind, and speech. It will enhance spirituality. It will all be conducive to all of these qualities in our mind. It will not take away from that. So an example of a sattvika type of food is ghee. Ghee is a type of food that will actually help to promote these sort of qualities in the mind. Okay, so that's why ghee is considered sattvika in nature. For instance, if we want to term a food rajasika in nature, it's foods that would actually promote qualities such as pride and anger and vanity and jealousy in our body. So for instance, an example of this is onions and garlic. Okay, onions and garlic is a very, very good, very therapeutically useful natural herb. Well, it's a herb, yes. So garlic is therapeutically wonderful. It has many properties and it's very good for the body. However, the reason why people who are trying to enhance the spiritual qualities in them, they avoid eating onion and garlic, is because it enhances these properties. It enhances the qualities such as pride and anger and jealousy and vanity and also bravery. It ignites you. So because of that, that's the reason why people who are trying to observe more sattvika qualities or enhance more sattvika qualities in themselves avoid foods that will enhance rajasika or tamasika qualities. Okay, so this is the reason why they avoid eating onions and garlic. Okay, does that make sense now? Because you always hear about it and you think, why would you not want to eat garlic? Garlic is so good for you. Yes, it is a little bit smelly, but it's very good for you. But this is the reason why. This is the reason why, because it is more rajasika in nature and not sattvika in nature. Okay. However, ginger, which has similar qualities and has also equal amount of therapeutic properties, is more sattvika in nature. So instead of using garlic in their food, they would use ginger in their food because the ginger would help to enhance the sattvika qualities without enhancing the rajasika qualities. Okay? Tamasika foods are foods that are, for instance, foods that are very heavy, which are stale, which have been sitting around for a long time, like they have been prepared a day or two or three in advance, leftovers, food that has almost no prana left in it, frozen foods, microwave foods, all of these are more tamasika in nature. Actually, the microwave foods, we had talked about this even in the last one, would actually fall under rajasika only because it's actually been zapped and it has too much of that fire element quality in it, so it's a little bit more rajasika, but it falls under both categories. It's definitely rajasika, but it's also tamasika in the sense that it has no prana left in that food, so that's why it's also tamasika in nature, because it enhances these tamasika qualities such as fear, ignorance, sleep, laziness, and grief. Okay, so foods that will produce these sort of effects are considered as tamasika sort of foods. Okay, so the next question in your review sheet or your study guide is list the 20 gunas in English and in Sanskrit. So I'm not going to go over these because those are fairly standard. You've already done that quite a bit, and you know it's just a quick review of what's, I think it's on page 24 or I think it's page 23 or 24 in your manual, but I may be wrong. But you know where the 20 gunas are, so that's fairly standard. Just review the table and you'll be fine. Okay. Number 11 is, what are the common signs and symptoms of aggravated Vata, Pitta, and Kapha? Okay. So typically, what do we notice when this you guys should hopefully know by now? I think you do, because we have now sort of, we have developed your Ayurvedic perspective now, that when you start to see these typical qualities, like, oh, it seems like that's more Vata, and that's more Pitta, and that's more Kapha. So you guys have really done very well in imbibing these concepts and this knowledge and sort of making it your own as well. But just to review, aggravated Vata or an increase of Vata is typically associated with pain. So all sorts of pain is almost always associated with Vata, regardless of if it's more burning sensation or it's a numbing pain. But if it's pain, it's almost always associated with Vata, because without the presence of Vata, we cannot perceive pain. So it may be a purely Vata type of pain, or it may be a Pitta type of pain with underlying Vata, or it may be a Kapha type of pain with underlying Vata. But here again, the common factor is Vata needs to be aggravated in order for us to perceive pain. Okay? So pain is always associated with aggravated Vata. Dryness is again always associated with aggravated Vata. Constipation. And constipation is nothing but dryness of your colon. Basically your body trying to absorb as much moisture as it possibly can, and therefore it results in being constipated. Lack of sleep. These are just some examples of aggravated Vata. Of course, you have more in your text, but I think by now you guys have been able to really understand when a person has aggravated Vata, what that means, and you can pretty much come up with at least 3 to 4 examples of aggravated Vata. Okay. Typical signs and symptoms or examples of aggravated Pitta are burning sensation. Again, burning sensation is almost always associated with Pitta. You cannot perceive that without Pitta. Burning sensation in any part of the body. Migraines are another example of aggravated Pitta. Itching is almost always associated with Pitta. You would think itching would be associated with Kapha, but it needs the factor of the irritation that is associated with Pitta in order to feel the itching. Okay, so itching is almost always associated with Pitta. And foul smell. Foul smell is a good key indicator of aggravated Pitta. Okay. Examples of aggravated Kapha. So we know what Kapha is made of. It is made up of the water and earth elements, very grounding. So when there is too much of that, what do we get in our bodies? How does our body indicate the excessive nature of these two elements in qualities such as heaviness? So if a person feels really heavy, they feel weighed down, physically or mentally, typically is associated with increase of Kapha. Too much of moisture, again, the water element quality of Kapha. Excessive sleep, because again, more of heaviness, it makes you feel dull. It slows down the movement of the mind and the body, and therefore causes you to feel sleepy. Lack of interest, because again, remember we had talked about the mind being something that's constantly moving, and the mind, it's constantly moving. It also has its own shrutas. It moves throughout the body. It circulates throughout the body. So when there is an increase of Kapha, it's basically sort of like plaque building up in these passages and in these channels. And the mind has to try and slug through all of that plaque and that blockage or that buildup and try to move in the same pace and manner that it always does. So when there's that blockage or that buildup, it slows it down. And because it slows it down, the person will not feel that interested as they typically would if that block was not there or if that weight was not there. Okay, so that's why typically you find a lack of interest, also known as arati in increased Kapha. And also lethargy. lethargy. Okay, these are typical examples and signs of aggravated kapha. So the next item on your study guide is, where are the major seats of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha in the body? So we had talked about this as well. Of course, there are different areas where the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha carries out its functions in the body, and that can be a little bit mismatched. But there are major domains where Kapha is predominantly there, Pitta is predominantly there, and Vata is predominantly there. It's kind of like their homes. Okay, so the Kapha home or the Kapha domain is from the chest upwards. Okay, so sort of from like the sternum upwards. So the chest, the throat, and the head, all of this is the domain or the area of Kapha. From that same sort of point, the chest, till the umbilicus, the mid region of your body, that is the Pitta domain. Okay, that's where Pitta, that's sort of the Pitta home. And from the umbilicus downwards is the major home or the domain of Vata. Okay, these are just the three major categories or positions where they are located. Of course, there are more specific locations, like for instance, Vata is specifically located in the colon, Pitta is specifically located in the stomach and in the pancreas and the small intestines, and Kapha is particularly specifically located in the head and in the sinuses and also in the chest. Okay, but of course, if we want to look at major regions, these are the regions where the doshas are located. Okay. The next is define Agni. So this is a great question because it can be a very long answer, but for the short answer, what is expected of you is Agni basically means fire, the fire element. And this fire element is extremely important because it has multiple functions. It's what helps to sustain and keep us going. Okay, and in Ayurveda, this is a very, very important concept. I think I had shared this with you in one of the classes that in Charaka Samhita, they say, if you can treat the Agni and if you can balance the Agni, that in itself is half of your treatment protocol. If you're trying to treat any sort of condition, or if you're trying to make a person feel better or bring them back to a state of health, just balancing off the Agni itself or keeping it nice and strong and healthy will be able to provide a successful outcome. Because if the Agni is strong, whatever you advise to take in, for instance, food, because you can stop taking medication, you can stop doing activities, but you can't stop taking food. It is an essential part of life. You have to consume food. So even the food acts as medicine. The only way it can act that way is if the Agni is strong. If your Agni is strong, then whatever you consume can be benefited by your body. Your body can really have access to that. But if your Agni is not strong, you can give a person amrita. You can give a person nectar, divine nectar that will create immortality. And even then, it cannot be digested, it cannot be absorbed, it cannot be assimilated, and therefore it has no use. So therefore, increasing the Agni or maintaining the balance of your Agni is so essential to a person being healthy. Okay? So the definition of Agni here, definition of Agni is basically the fire element, the presence of fire in the body. And that is responsible for digestion, for assimilation, for metabolism. It's also essential for knowledge and for understanding, enthusiasm, because we know that fire itself is also responsible for the maintenance and the understanding, the actual functioning of the mind. Okay, so the fire element is very, very key and very essential to our being. So when we talk about that, is just looking at Agni in general. This Agni manifests in 13 different types or 13 forms when we're specifically talking about digestion in the body. Okay, so the 13 types of Agni responsible for digestion are, the first one is the Chatra Agni, which is the one that is located in the stomach. Then you have an Agni for each one of the Dhatus, so that's 7 Dhatu Agnis. So if you want to be specific, there's Rasa Dhatu Agni, Rakta Dhatu Agni, Mamsa Dhatu Agni, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there is a Agni for each one of the dhatus, so that's 7 Dhatu Agnis. And then there are 5 Bhuta Agnis. There is 5 Agnis for each one of the elements. Okay, so each one of the elements have their separate Agnis. And we had talked about this as well. The reason why each one has an Agni is because the Jatra Agni is the major Agni that helps to control all of the other Agnis. The Jatra Agni is the one that's located in the stomach. So when you consume food, it first gets broken down by the Jatra Agni. That's the first stage of digestion, basically. And from there, it then gets passed on to the dhatus. So it goes first to Rasa Dhatu. So in there, you have already existing Rasa Dhatu, and then you're getting newly formed Rasa Dhatu. So how is that? How are you getting this newly formed Rasa Dhatu? With the help of the Rasa Dhatu Agni. So the food has been broken down in the stomach. After being broken down in the stomach, it goes to the dhatus. It gets broken down even further, metabolized further by the Rasa Dhatu Agni, and therefore it transforms and it nourishes the already existing Rasa Dhatu and also produces new Rasa Dhatu. And then from there, it then travels again and goes to the Rakta Dhatu, and therefore it goes through again the same process of metabolism. And finally, it goes from there, it gets to the even more subtle portions of nutrition where it even nourishes the 5 elements in the body through the 5 Bhuta Agnis. Okay, so that's how you have 13 types of Agnis, and they're responsible for digestion, metabolism, basically nutrition in general. Okay, so in that, the next one is, what is the Jatra Agni? The Jatra literally translates to stomach. Okay, Jatra means stomach. So Jatra Agni is the Agni in the stomach. Isn't that easy? Very simple. See, if you learn Sanskrit, it's very simple. But we don't expect you to do that, so that's okay. But the Jatra Agni is the Agni in the stomach. And it's basically the master or the controller of all the other Agnis. So if the Jatra Agni is presenting as Sama Agni or balanced, then all the other Agnis will also be balanced. If the Jatra Agni is presenting as Tikshna Agni or being very strong, then the other Agnis also simultaneously start to become too overactive and very strong. And so therefore, the person tends to burn off everything. It burns off the nutrition that they're eating. It burns off the nutrition from the food that they're eating. And it starts to also burn off the already stored nutrition that they have. Okay? So that's typically what happens in Tikshna Agni. So now do you understand when we talked about the different types of Agnis? Those are the presentations of the same Jatra Agni. So you can have Sama Agni, which is a state of how the Jatra Agni is occurring. You can have Tikshna Agni of the presentation of how the Jatra Agni is occurring. Okay? And that's why it can change. It can change. You can have Sama Agni, and you can also end up eventually having Manda Agni. And if you increase the Agni again, you can bring it back to Sama Agni. Okay? But the Jatra Agni is always going to be the Jatra Agni. It can just present in different ways. Okay? That's the same way like how you have the same one person, but they can put on different outfits and they look different. They look in different ways. Like you have your night makeup, then you have your day makeup, you have your going out outfits, and then you have your work outfits. But ideally, it's still you. It's just different outfits. You're just presenting yourself in different ways. Okay, but it's still you. So it's the same thing. The Jatra Agni is always a Jatra Agni, but it presents itself in different ways. Okay, depending on what's happening. So the next question is, what is the difference between Pitta and Agni? Which is a really good question because they seem very similar, and we tend to misconceive that they're both one and the same thing, but they're not. There is a very subtle difference between the two. The Agni is just fire alone. Pitta dosha is actually the fire and water element in combination. Those two combined is Pitta dosha, whereas Agni is just Agni alone. Okay, and also if we look at if we want to be more specific, the qualities of these two are also very similar, except there is one major difference between the two. Agni has the qualities of, or the gunas of, being dry, hot, light, subtle, and sharp. Whereas Pitta has the qualities of hot, liquid, subtle, and sharp. So you notice the difference here. Agni is dry, whereas Pitta is liquid. Okay? And Agni is light, whereas Pitta, that's not necessarily the case. Okay? So dry and light qualities, or ruksha and laghu qualities, are there in Agni, whereas those qualities are not there in Pitta. Okay? So those are the major differences between Pitta and Agni. And it's there in the second page of the 8th chapter, with the chapter on Agni. The second page at the beginning itself, there's a description of the difference between Pitta and Agni. Okay? So the next question is, list the malas. So we had just briefly talked about this before, but the different malas are, or the three major malas are, sweat, which is swedas, mutra, which is urine, and purisha, which is fecal matter. Okay? Three major waste products from the body. Malas means waste products. And these are the three major waste products. Okay? Next is, what are the different tastes, and which of these pacify the doshas? So an easy way to remember this, which I had mentioned in the last review as well, a really easy way to remember it is try to memorize the 6 rasas, or the 6 tastes, in this order: madhura, amla, lavana, then tikta, katu, kashaya. Okay, so madhura, amla, lavana, which is sweet, sour, and salty, these 3 increase kapha and they decrease vata. Similarly, the second group of 3, which is bitter, pungent, and astringent, those pacify kapha and they aggravate vata. Okay, so there's a complete relation, opposite relation, between that which increases kapha and decreases vata. Okay, and the major thing to remember, the other, so you got vata and kapha out of the way. For pitta, sweet, bitter, and astringent are the ones that pacify pitta, because those are the only tastes that don't have the fire element in it. And the other ones that do have the fire element in it, such as sour, salty, and pungent, those aggravate pitta. Okay, so when you study the elemental composition of the taste, it's easy to remember it this way: that pitta is sweet, bitter, and astringent, that pacifies pitta, whereas sour, salty, and pungent increase pitta, because sour, salty, and pungent, all 3 of them have fire element in its composition, whereas sweet, bitter, and astringent do not have the fire element in their composition. Okay? Okay, so that takes care of 18 and 19. So number 20 is, list the six tastes, which we just talked about, and their elemental composition. Okay, so madhura, which is sweet, is made up of earth and water. Amla, which is sour, is made up of earth and fire. Lavana, which is salty, is made up of water and fire. Tikta, which is bitter, is made up of space and air. Katu, which is pungent, is made up of fire and air. And kashaya, which is astringent, is made up of earth and air. Okay? So, that takes care of up till number 21. Yes. Okay. That takes care of number 21. Number 22, 23, and 24, we had talked about in the first review session. And if you guys want, we can go over that again. I just want to quickly touch on 25 and 27. So 25 is which tastes are beneficial for dental hygiene. So basically, number one is tikta rasa, which is bitter. And the reason why is because bitter taste tends to increase salivation, so therefore it flushes out, as well as bitter taste tends to actually be antiseptic and antibacterial. So it really helps to sort of kill the bacteria in the mouth, as well as flush out the mouth by increasing salivation. So it's really and also helps to maintain the health of your teeth and gums. So bitter or tikta rasa is the number one rasa for dental hygiene. Obviously, you can use also lavana, salty, and you can also use kashaya, astringent. But of those three, bitter is number one for dental hygiene. Okay? And also, we had just briefly talked about it. It's not really as important, but just again, for you to know at this level, you just need to be aware that there are 13 different channels, major channels that we talk about, or shrotas in the body. Okay, and of those 13, another easy way to remember, there's 7 for each of the dhatus. Okay, then there is 3 for each of the malas. So there you go, you get 10 right there. And then you have prana vahashrotas, which is for breathing, basically. Anna vahashrotas, which is for food, which is the GIT. And prana and udaka vahashrotas, which is the channels for fluid balance. Okay? So apart from the 7 for the dhatus and the 3 for the malas, you also have 3 extra to remember is pranavaha, annavaha, and udakavaha. Prana means breathing, the respiratory system. Annavaha is for sort of the digestive system, or the GIT. And udakavaha is for fluid balance. Okay, so the channels for fluid balance. So those are the 13 major shrotases, or channels in the body. Of course, there's additional channels for women, which is the Artavava shrotas, which is for menstrual blood, and also 2 extra for breast milk. Okay, so there's extra shrotases for women. And some also say that there's also the opinion that there is the manovah shrotas, or the channels through which the mind circulates. Some say that we can say that there is a separate channel for where the mind circulates. Others say that the mind circulates in all the channels, so you can't really separate it out and say there's a manovah shrotas. It's the mind circulates in all of these channels. Okay, so there's 2 opinions, but again, just for your knowledge, just for you to know, that's also out there. Okay. So one quick thing I wanted to cover before we wrap up is also you guys had discussed just a few times in class about prajna prada. Okay, I'm just gonna put this in the chat here, so just in case you guys don't remember what it is. Prajna Pradha. Prajna Pradha. It's pronounced Prajna Pradha. Okay? And that basically means crimes against wisdom, or intellectual blasphemy, as they say in some of the Sanskrit English texts. And what that means is, when you have a certain amount of knowledge where you know better, and you still go against your better judgment, you go against your better knowledge, and still do actions that are going to be unhealthy for you, then that is considered as prajna pradha. Okay? It is aparadha. It is actually a wrongful action. Okay? Aparadha means, literally, it does mean a crime, or a wrongful action, or a sin. And some people would say it as that as well. So what the actual definition of prajna pradha means, it's dhi dhriti smriti vibhramsha karma yat kurute ashubham prajna pradam tam vidyat sarva dosha prakopanam. And that's very important for us to know. It's one of the major causative factors for disease. So what does that mean? If you really break it down, dhi is the intellect. Dhriti is the ability to retain knowledge. And smriti is the ability to remember or to recollect that knowledge. Vibramsha means when there is a perversion or a disruption of this process. So for instance, we know that if we eat, if we eat too much, if we overeat, or if we overeat, or if we eat pizza, or we eat all of these foods that are not healthy for us, we know it's not healthy. We know, for instance, that's how our body is going to react to it. But we still give in and we eat it anyway. Or for instance, alcohol isn't good for you, or smoking isn't good for you. You have all of this information. Someone has told you this, so it's there in your intellect. You have to be able to retain that knowledge, so that is your dhriti. And smriti is you need to be able to remember this at the appropriate time when you're about to do this action. If there's a disruption in any of these processes of either having that knowledge, or keeping that knowledge, or remembering that knowledge at the appropriate time, then that causes us to do karma ashubham, which means karma is action, and ashubham means that which is not good for us. Shubha is good, or which is conducive. So ashubha means which is non-conducive. So we do actions that are non-conducive. Karma yat kurute ashubham prajna pradam tam vidyat sarva dosha prakopanam. So what that leads to? It leads to sarva dosha, all the doshas, prakopa, or aggravation. So this is one of the major causative factors for disease, or why we become unhealthy. Because we know better. We know that we should not do these things, but we still do it anyway. And therefore, we are not listening to our better sense and our inner conscious telling us this is not good for you, but it's okay. I'll give it a little bit. A little bit's not going to do any harm. And so you do it, and then it becomes your karma, because you have actually decided to do this, even though you have better judgment not to. And this happens a lot. This is one of the major factors that we face in this day and age. We can, if we really wanted to trace back everything that happens to us, we can kind of trace it back to this sort of very general factor that we know better, but we still do it anyway. And therefore, what leads to, or however long it takes for it to manifest, it really has come back to what our actions or our non-conducive karmas were that produced those results. Okay? So prajna pradha is crimes against wisdom, because it's crimes against your better sense or your better judgment. Okay? So this is really a good thing to remember, because it's one of the major factors that we face in this day and age, that we all have access to knowledge. We all have access to this information. That's why we have this lovely thing called the internet and Google. But we have access to knowledge, and we have access to know now what will produce non-conducive things to our health. And if we still keep up with that, and we still keep up those practices, and we still expose ourselves to that, then therefore any action will have a reaction. Okay? So that's what prajna pradha is. Prajna pradha talks about that willful transgression, where you're consciously deciding to do something that's not good for you. Okay, so I think we've been able to cover almost all of the study guide. Again, if you guys have questions and you're not clear about anything from now till the exam, please feel free to send questions to me or Hillary, and we'll try to get those answers to you as soon as possible so that you're able to go over it and you're able to have that clarity. And I can absolutely say that you guys are going to do great. You've been wonderful students. You've been very receptive. And I know that so deep down, somewhere in there, all of this information has been stored. It is definitely in your buddhi. It is there in your intellect. So it's just to go with a clear mind, and you'll be able to access all of that information that you have. Okay? And not just pass the exam, but really use that and incorporate it into your lifestyle, and you'll all be able to experience what is there in Ayurveda. Okay? So I hope you all, you're welcome. I hope you all have a very good night.
Okay, thanks everyone. I'll send out the recording. Have a good night.
Good night.